Hi everyone, my name is Lane Chapman. I'm one of the current residents at the Studio of Missoula, and today I am going to do a surface design demo to show you how I create my surfaces. So I'm going to show you how I did the surface designs on this mug. I'll be going over a slip transfer technique with newsprints, and that's how I created the flowers. And then a mishima technique, which is basically a slip inlay, and that is how I get the fine black lines that you see on the moth. So here's my blank mug. Here's the bottom. So the first thing that I do is figure out what I want to put on the mug. For this demo, I'm going to do it exactly like this one. So I have my moth image, and I draw these on tracing paper. And I usually photocopy them just so I can reuse them over and over again without having to redraw it every time I want to use this. So I use a mechanical pencil. I'm just going to trace it onto the cup where I want it. I don't trace every detail. I'm basically just tracing on the basic outline, and then I'll add the details later on when I do the mishima technique. Okay, so here's the basic outline. It's a little hard to see right now. So the next step is to paint the moth. When I put a design on a mug, I think about how I want it to look in the end and how I'm going to have to layer each technique to get what I want. So for this one, I painted the moth first. So I use colored slips. I have just a base white slip that I split up and add colorants to. So here's what a test tile looks like of that, one with a clear and then just raw clay. So that's what I'll be painting the colors with today. I do add a little bit of underglaze after bisque, but just a little bit for more detail or shadows or highlights. So I use my slips pretty thin. You don't have to at all. They can be as thick as you want. You can create texture with slips. But I am a watercolorist at heart, so I use them as if they were watercolors. And you can mix them together to make other colors as well. Same with underglazes. With these slips, you can only use on greenware, but that's what I prefer to paint on anyway, so I'm okay with that. So I paint this in segments just so I can still see what I'm doing when I'm ready to do the mishima technique. So this is just the slip painting. I'll go back and add a little more detail with color and the black spots with an underglaze after I bisque it. Oh, and I forgot to mention, so when I start decorating, my mug is pretty leather hard. It's soft enough that if I could attach things or I can move it around a little bit. But you want it stiff enough that you can handle it a lot and it's not going to move its shape or warp. And dry enough that it doesn't really smear the clay too much into the color. So I'm going to let this dry. After this is dry, I'm going to take just a pencil and mark off this this round part here because I want to leave this background raw clay. So I'm going to wax off this whole area, including the moth. So while I'm waiting for this to dry, I'm going to go ahead and just pencil out the round circle that I want around this for the raw clay area. And then I want this to be pretty dry because when I wax over this, it could smear it. And I just use this green wax. I got it from the Bray. It works really well. I do water it down just a little bit. I found that if I water it down too much, sometimes it wipes away later on in my process, which I'll show you. So don't water it down too much if you get this, but it does work really well. And I use a really old, terrible brush for waxing because it will ruin your brushes. But I do clean them with a brush cleaner after every use, and I've had this brush for probably 10 years. So I'm just going to wax over the raw clay area and the moth too. So I'm waxing over this. One reason is I'm going to dip the whole mug into a white slip. Another reason is when I do the Mishima technique, I put a black underglaze into the lines and I wipe it back. And if I didn't wax, I would wipe off the whole design and color. So it just protects the color and the clay too. And I forgot to tell you, this clay is a really beautiful red stoneware that I get from the Bray. It's called M390. It's really soft, doesn't have any grog in it. I believe it has mica in it, so it's a little sparkly. And it's great for throwing. It's been great for hand building so far, and I really like it. So this is the wax. It'll dry a little more translucent, so I'll still be able to see what I'm drawing. So I want this to dry completely before I dip it into the slip. So while we're waiting on that to dry, I will explain a little bit about how I make these, basically making your own decals, the flowers. So this is a piece of newsprint. You can buy it really cheap in a pad, and I just draw on with pencil my flower, whatever design I'm doing. And then basically what you do is I'm going to paint on this with slips. And then when I'm ready to transfer, I paint on a white slip on the background and then transfer it kind of like a temporary tattoo onto the clay. And I'll explain it step by step as I go through it. So the first things first is I'm gonna use slips to paint the flowers. So you wanna make sure that you paint foreground to background. So obviously with the flower, the yellow will be the foreground. So I'm gonna paint the yellow first, and then I'll put a little like different colors in the petals for the veins, and then I'll paint one color over all of it. So I'm going to paint the middles of the flowers first with a yellow. So for this I'm just doing like the basic colors. I'll go back after bisque and just add just a little bit, maybe a different shade of yellow to show the details in the flowers. You can, sometimes when I make these decals, I'll use a slip trailing bottle with a black underglaze and outline my design and then paint on top of it so that it has a black outline so you can really tell what it is. For this, I really like the contrast between the really fine detailed moth drawing versus the kind of blurry like blobs of the flowers. Also, you can use underglaze or slips for this. I find that slips work better than the underglazes. They don't dry quite as fast. But either one works. And I find that this process so far has been best on greenware. You can do it on bisque, it's just a little more difficult and it doesn't come out quite as clear. Okay, so here's the middle of the flowers. So now I'm just going to do just the veins of the flower. I just have a couple different pinkish purples that I'm going to use. And when it comes out, it's really not going to be super clear, but that's what I like about it. As for my slips, I use like I said, I use a white base. Right now I'm using, I believe it's all cones, all temperatures, and it's a Val Cushing slip. And I've used it on several different clay bodies and it's worked really well so far. I haven't had a lot of issues with it. And for the colored slips, all I did when I tested them is I made a big batch of the white slip and I split it up into 100-gram batches. And then I added like 5, 10, 15% of mason stain to get the colors. So like for the yellow and this purple that I'm using, I have like 3 different tones of it. And I use underglazes a lot too. I use the Velvet Amico underglazes. But the underglazes are a little more vibrant than the slips. The slips are a little more of a pastel, like duller color that I like. It's a little more earthy. And I like the, you can see like the quality of the brush strokes and the hand of the artist with the slips more than the underglazes. So I'm going to do the same thing I did with just a bit of a lighter color just to add some contrast. So here's this. And then after this dries, I'm just going to paint a very light lavender color over the top of all of it. So because I'm doing this foreground to background, I can just paint the next layer just over the whole thing. And it'll still show up the way that I want it to. And since I don't have like a black or any other color to do an outline, I'm just going to paint this as nicely as I can to my pencil drawing so that you can still tell what it is. Okay, so here's what it looks like when they're done. So I'm going to let these completely dry. After they're dry, I'm going to cut them apart, and then I will explain the next step when we get there. Okay, so now that the wax is dry, I'm going to dip this whole mug into white slip. I keep my slip pretty thin. Sometimes I dip things 2 or 3 times just to get some depth in like the contrast with the different whites. So this one I'm just going to do once. So now I wait for that to dry until I go to the next step. So now I'm going to show you how to do the slip transfers. I did a few on here, and the colors will come out a little bit brighter once it's been bisqued. And now I'll show you how I got to this. So this is the slip transfer we did earlier. You can come back to these at any time. I try to use them right off. Sometimes if you handle them too much, it'll chip off a little bit. If that happens, you can just paint back over it with the color. So now that they're dry, I'm going to use a white slip. You can use any color. I just prefer to use white since I'm putting this on a white background. And I'm just going to paint over the image with the white slip. So here's what it looks like. And so you want to let this slip dry a little bit. You don't want it to dry all the way though. Basically you want the slip to be leather hard when you transfer it. So right now the white slip is just resaturating the layers of slip underneath, and that's what causes it to transfer once you put it on. So once this is a little bit dry, I'll use a rib to transfer it onto the pot and then peel it off. So these take a little bit to dry. I usually do a few at a time. In the meantime, while that's drying, I'll go ahead and start the mishima process. So this mug has been sitting out, and it's on the stiff side of leather hard, which is really perfect for carving into this for the mishima process. If it's too soft, sometimes the line just closes up on itself. So I find it better to do it when it's a little on the dry side. So I just use an X-Acto blade, and basically I'm just going to draw the moth on with the X-Acto blade. And I'm just going deep enough to create like a sort of trench for the underglaze to go into. But obviously you don't want to go all the way through. So this is what it looks like so far. This top part's a little difficult because of the transition. Okay, so here's the bottom part. Okay, so now the slip transfers are ready. So they're still wet, just a little bit. I can touch them and it doesn't leave a fingerprint, but I can still tell that they're damp, and that's the perfect time. So I'm just going to place it on here, press it down, and then I have a rib, and just carefully at an angle, just rub over it. And I go in all different ways to really get all of the slip off of this paper, and because I have texture on this mug, I want to get in all the little nooks and crannies of this mug. So when that's done, peel it off. Sorry, I picked a bad color for you to see this well. If at any point some of the slip doesn't transfer and it stays on the paper, you can just press it back down and just rib back over it, and it should come off. And then I just do that until I'm done. I've never tried reusing the newsprint paper after this. I usually just throw it away, but maybe I'll try and see if it works, so I don't waste so much paper. So like this one's not gonna fit, all of it's not gonna fit on there, so I'll just rib over what'll fit and then not worry about the rest. those are done. Okay, so now the last step is to fill in the Mishima lines with a black underglaze. You can use slips. Because underglazes are a little more vibrant and have a little more color in them, I like to use the black underglaze because I get a dark line, but you can use any color or any slip. So this is just Amico Velvet Underglaze. This one's jet black. I think I have velour black, and then there's just black, I believe. I kind of use them interchangeably. Electric fired, I don't really see a difference in the color. Atmospheric, they do change colors from like blue to black sometimes. So this mug will be fired to cone 6 in an electric kiln. So I'm just painting this over the lines. I go back and forth just to make sure I push the underglaze into the line. So now that the lines are filled, I'm just going to wipe back the excess. And I use a sponge that's like kind of wet. You don't want to squeeze it out totally. It makes it a little easier to wipe off. Okay. So there are the lines. Sorry that you can't see them very well. So this is pretty much done for now. On this one, I did add these little dots here. Naturally, I thought I had everything from the studio, but I forgot this tool that I used to make these dots. But basically all I use is the needle tip of a slip trailing bottle, and I just stamp it in there. So after this has been bisque fired, what I'm gonna do is I put a black wash over the whole mug with the underglaze, and then I wipe it back, and it leaves the black in these little dots and just gives it some more depth, so it's not so like vibrant and white. And then, before that I wet sand everything with a 400 grit sandpaper, because I like it to be like really, really smooth. And then I do the black wash, and then I'll add any detail color, so like these black dots on here. And I'll add a signature. This one I carved in, but with this one I'll just paint it on. And then after that it's ready to glaze. So I just have a liner in here, and then I just paint clear on in certain spots. So there's a clear on this flower, and a clear on this one. I really like this raw clay and how it looks. I don't like it as much when it has a clear over the whole thing. And that's just my preference. So one last thing that I forgot to add, just because I don't have an outline on these flowers, they're kind of hard to see sometimes. So with this one, I'm just drawing a line around the flower just to trace over it. So I'm not filling this in with anything, I'm just going to trace over this. So this is the final product until it has been bisque fired. So here's what the mug looks like after bisque firing, and it's been sanded smooth. So I explained this earlier, but I'm just going to paint a black wash with a Amico. So I'm just going to paint a black wash on this with the Amico underglaze, wipe it back, and then just add some more detail color into the moth. And then I'll just add maybe some clear here and there on the outside, and then just a liner on the inside, and then it'll be done. So if you made it to the end of this, thanks so much for watching. I hope that it was informative. Sorry about the quality. This is my first time doing this, so I'm learning. But thank you again. And if you'd like to help out the Clay Studio, you can go to their website at www.theclaystudio.org and hit the Donate Now button. It'd be really awesome of you. So thanks so much. Bye. I like to draw dead things.